The wind howled over the barren wasteland of Typhos 9, carrying fine red dust across the cracked ground. The sky was a dull orange haze, and the air was thick with toxins. Ryan Carter pulled his cloak tighter around himself, his biomask hissing softly as it filtered the poisonous atmosphere into breathable air. His ship had crashed 3 days ago. The distress beacon was active, but there had been no response. He was alone on this dead planet, with only his oxygen supply dwindling by the hour. Ryan carefully stepped over a patch of unstable ground, his boots kicking up dust. His eyes scanned the horizon for anything useful: wreckage, shelter, or, if he was lucky, some sign of life. Instead, he found a body. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, but as he moved closer, his heart tightened. A figure lay slumped against a jagged rock formation, unmoving. It was not human. The armor was the first thing he noticed: black and silver plating, scratched and dented from battle. A helmet with sharp ridges lay nearby, revealing an alien face beneath. Deep blue skin, faint glowing markings along the forehead, and sharp features. It was a Velkai warrior. Ryan knew about their kind. The Velkai were feared across the galaxy, known for their strength, speed, and warrior culture. They rarely spoke to humans, unless it was across a battlefield. So why was one alone and dying here? Ryan hesitated. He had no reason to help. The Velkai were not allies, and he barely had enough oxygen for himself. His rational mind told him to walk away, to focus on his own survival. But something stopped him. The warrior's chest barely moved, struggling to breathe. There was a gaping wound on the side, dark violet blood seeping into the dust. And the face, despite its fierce features, looked strangely peaceful, as if it had accepted death. Ryan exhaled sharply. "Damn it," he muttered, dropping to one knee beside the alien. He pulled out his portable med scanner and ran a quick bioscan. The results made his stomach drop. The Velkai could survive many injuries, but they needed a small amount of oxygen to live. The planet's air was too toxic, and this warrior was slowly suffocating. Ryan glanced at his own oxygen levels, less than 30% remaining. He had enough for maybe 2 more days. He clenched his teeth. Would this warrior have saved him if the roles were reversed? Unlikely. The Velkai had no love for humans. And yet, Ryan pulled a small oxygen injector from his belt and pressed it against the warrior's neck. The device hissed as it delivered a short burst of pure oxygen into the bloodstream. The effect was instant. The alien gasped, their eyes snapping open. Ryan flinched, stepping back, his hand hovering near his weapon. The warrior's gaze locked onto him, sharp and alert. Their pupils were slitted like a predator's, glowing faintly in the dim light. For a moment, neither moved. Then the alien tried to sit up, but groaned in pain, collapsing again. Ryan exhaled. "Yeah, you're not going anywhere." The warrior's breathing was still shallow, but the oxygen had given them a few more minutes. Ryan scanned the surroundings. They couldn't stay here. The planet was crawling with scavenger drones, mechanical hunters that picked off survivors for scrap. "I should go," Ryan muttered. He had done enough. But as he turned, something unexpected happened. A weak hand grabbed his arm. Ryan froze. The Velkai warrior's grip was firm, despite their weakness. Their golden eyes flickered, filled with confusion. Why? Their voice was hoarse, but the question was clear. Why had he saved them? Ryan didn't have an answer. Instead, he sighed, rubbing a hand over his mask. "I don't know," he admitted. The warrior stared at him for a long moment. Then their eyes fluttered shut, unconscious again. Ryan looked at the small oxygen gauge on his wrist. The levels had dropped slightly after the injection. A few more hours lost. He shook his head. "I must be losing my mind." And yet, he didn't leave. Instead, he carefully lifted the alien onto his shoulders, adjusting their weight. If he stayed here, they would both die. He needed to find shelter. Fast. As he took the first step forward, a distant mechanical whirring filled the air. Ryan stiffened. The scavenger drones had found them. He gritted his teeth and started running. Ryan's breath was heavy as he carried the alien warrior across the rough terrain. The wind howled, kicking up red dust around him. His biomask hissed, filtering the toxic air, but he could feel his oxygen levels dropping. Behind him, the whirring sound of scavenger drones grew louder. They were coming. Ryan tightened his grip on the unconscious Valkyrie warrior slung over his shoulders. Every instinct told him to drop the extra weight and run, but he ignored it. He had already made his choice. He wasn't going to let them die here. He needed shelter. Now, looking ahead, he spotted a rocky ridge not far away. If he could reach it, maybe he could find a cave or a crevice to hide in. The ground beneath him was uneven, every step a struggle. His boots slipped against the dry, cracked earth, but he pushed forward. Then, a sharp metallic screech pierced the air. Ryan turned his head just in time to see a scavenger drone swooping down from the sky. It was a twisted machine, its sleek metal body covered in jagged limbs, glowing red sensors scanning the area. The drone locked onto him. Ryan cursed under his breath. He dropped to one knee, lowering the alien warrior onto the ground as carefully as possible. His hand went to his blaster, pulling it free from his belt. The drone charged, its claws reaching out. Ryan fired. A burst of blue plasma shot from his weapon, hitting the drone's outer shell. Sparks flew, but the drone barely flinched. "Great," Ryan muttered. "Of course, it has armor." The drone lunged again. Ryan rolled to the side, barely avoiding its razor-sharp claws. He hit the ground hard, dust filling his mask's filter. He needed a better plan. Then he remembered the Valkyrie's helmet. Ryan scrambled toward it, grabbing the sleek metal headpiece that had fallen earlier. He had seen Valkyrie warriors use built-in energy weapons in their armor before. Maybe. The drone slashed down, forcing Ryan to dodge again. He had no time left. Acting on instinct, he pressed his fingers along the side of the helmet, searching for a power trigger. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a bright energy pulse shot out, slamming into the drone's core. The machine shuddered violently before exploding in a burst of sparks and metal shards. Ryan shielded his face, feeling the shockwave ripple through his body. When he looked again, the drone was nothing but a pile of smoking debris. He exhaled, gripping the helmet tightly. That was lucky. But the victory was short-lived. In the distance, more drones were approaching, at least 3 of them, their glowing red eyes scanning the terrain. Ryan's heart pounded. He wouldn't win against that many. He turned back to the Valkyrie warrior. They were still unconscious, their chest rising and falling slowly. There was no time. Ryan lifted them again, forcing his legs to move. His muscles screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. The rocky ridge was close. He could make it. The drones closed in. Ryan pushed himself harder. 10 more steps. 5. 3. At the last second, he lunged into a narrow crevice between 2 large rocks, pulling the alien in with him. He pressed himself flat against the stone, holding his breath. Outside, the drones hovered, scanning the area. Ryan could hear the mechanical clicks as they searched. One of them let out a deep electronic growl, as if sensing something nearby. Ryan felt sweat drip down his back. If they found him now, it was over. For several agonizing seconds, the drones hovered. Then, they moved on. Ryan didn't breathe until the whirring faded into the distance. He let out a shaky exhale, feeling his legs finally give out. He and the alien collapsed against the rock wall, exhausted. For a long time, Ryan just sat there, staring at the ground. Then, a weak voice broke the silence. "Human." Ryan turned. The Valkyrie warrior's eyes were open, glowing faintly in the dim light. They were watching him, confusion and exhaustion in their gaze. "You saved me," they whispered. Ryan wiped the sweat from his forehead. Yeah, looks like it. The warrior's gaze lingered on him, as if trying to understand why. Ryan let out a breath, checking his oxygen levels again. 22% left. Not good. He glanced at the alien. Can you walk? They tried to push themselves up, but winced in pain. Too weak. Ryan sighed. Figures. His mind raced. The drones would return soon, and they couldn't stay here forever. He looked at the alien again. They were still watching him. Silent, unreadable. Finally, Ryan stood up. All right, he muttered, offering his hand. Let's find a way out of this mess. The Valkai warrior hesitated, then, slowly, took his hand. Ryan pulled them to their feet. The wasteland stretched ahead, danger lurking in every shadow. But there was no turning back now. They had to survive. Ryan tightened his grip around the Valkai warrior's arm, helping them stay upright. They were still weak, their breathing uneven, but at least they were awake now. The rocky crevice had provided temporary safety, but it wouldn't last. The scavenger drones were still out there, searching. If they stayed too long, they would be found. Ryan's oxygen levels blinked on his wrist display. 21% remaining. Not enough. The Valkai warrior leaned heavily against the rock, trying to steady themselves. Their golden eyes flickered to Ryan. You are human, they muttered, as if just realizing it. Ryan smirked. Glad we cleared that up. The warrior frowned but didn't argue. They looked around, taking in the barren wasteland, the sky's toxic orange haze, and the distant drones patrolling. Their expression darkened. This is bad, they said, their voice still weak. Ryan crossed his arms. No kidding. Mind telling me how you ended up here? Because from what I can tell, you weren't on a sightseeing trip. The Valkai hesitated, then sighed. I was in battle. My ship was shot down by an enemy fleet. I barely survived the crash. The drones found me soon after. Ryan nodded. Yeah, I saw the wreckage. You were lucky I came along. The warrior looked at him, studying him for a long moment. And yet, you saved me, even though you did not have to. Ryan shrugged. I don't make a habit of leaving people, or aliens, to die. The warrior's expression softened slightly, but the moment passed quickly. They straightened, rolling their shoulders as if testing their strength. We need to move, they said. The drones will come back. Ryan gestured toward the open wasteland. Got any ideas? Because if you know a way off this rock, I'm all ears. The Valkai was silent for a moment, then nodded. There is an old abandoned outpost nearby. It is hidden beneath the cliffs. I do not know if it still works, but if we can reach it, we might find shelter and a communication device. Ryan frowned. Might. The warrior gave a small, tired smirk. Do you have a better plan? Ryan exhaled. Fair point. All right. Lead the way. The warrior took a step forward, but immediately staggered, their bodies still too weak. Ryan caught them before they could fall. Yeah, that's not happening, he muttered. You're not in fighting shape yet. The warrior gritted their teeth, clearly hating their own weakness. But they didn't argue. Ryan pulled their arm over his shoulder, supporting most of their weight as they began moving. The journey was slow. The terrain was rough, and the wind made it even harder to see. Every step kicked up dust clouds, making Ryan's biomask work overtime to filter the air. As they walked, the Valkai kept glancing at him. Finally, Ryan sighed. All right. What is it? The warrior hesitated, then asked, What is your name, human? Ryan Carter. The warrior nodded. I am Zakara of the Valkai. Nice to meet you, Zakara, Ryan said. Now let's focus on not dying. Zakara gave a weak chuckle. Agreed. The drones returned. They had been walking for nearly half an hour when Ryan froze. A low mechanical hum echoed through the air. Zakara tensed. Drones. Ryan pulled her down behind a large rock, scanning the area. Up ahead, 3 scavenger drones hovered, their red sensors glowing as they swept the land. They were blocking the path. Ryan cursed under his breath. So much for an easy trip. Zikara clenched her fists. We must take them down quickly, before they alert more. Ryan glanced at her. You up for that? Zikara smirked weakly. I may not be at full strength, but I can still fight. Ryan fought fast. His blaster wouldn't pierce their armor, and they couldn't risk a prolonged fight. They needed to be smart. He looked around. The ground here was unstable, with cracks running through the rock formations. An idea formed. You see that ridge? Ryan whispered, pointing to a tall, loose rock formation just above the drones. Zikara nodded. Yes. If we can bring it down, it'll crush them. Zikara grinned. Clever, human. Ryan gave her a blaster. You aim for the weak points. I'll draw their attention. Before she could argue, he stood up and fired a shot into the air. The drones whipped around instantly, locking onto him. Ryan ran. The trap is set. The drones chased him, their weapons charging up. Ryan dodged behind boulders, making sure to lead them beneath the ridge. Zikara. Now. A sharp crack echoed as Zikara fired at the rock formation's weak point. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the entire ridge collapsed, sending tons of rock crashing down onto the drones. A loud explosion of sparks followed as they were buried beneath the rubble. Ryan let out a breath. That actually worked. Zikara approached him, her golden eyes gleaming. Impressive. Ryan smirked. Told you I was useful. She chuckled, then winced, still weak. Ryan steadied her. Come on, let's get to that outpost before more of those things show up. Together, they pressed forward, leaving the wreckage behind. The outpost was close. They just had to survive a little longer. Ryan and Zikara pressed forward, their steps slow but determined. The collapsed rock pile behind them had destroyed the scavenger drones, buying them precious time, but Ryan knew it wouldn't last. More would come. The wind howled, kicking up thick clouds of red dust, making it harder to see. Ryan's biomask hissed, filtering the toxic air, but his oxygen gauge blinked at 18%. He sighed, running out fast. Zikara stumbled, her strength still low. Ryan caught her before she could fall. Whoa, easy, he said. You okay? She gritted her teeth. I will be. Ryan frowned. Even though she was tough, he could see she was struggling. Her breathing was uneven, and the wound on her side was still leaking dark violet blood. We need to stop your bleeding, he said. You're losing too much blood. Zikara shook her head. We do not have time. The outpost is close. Ryan hesitated but nodded. All right, let's keep moving. The hidden entrance. After what felt like an hour of walking, they finally reached the cliffs. Rising from the cracked wasteland, the dark stone formations stretched high into the sky, their edges jagged like broken blades. Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow. Okay, so where's this outpost? Zikara looked around, then pointed at a narrow pathway between 2 massive boulders. There, she said. Ryan raised an eyebrow. You sure? Trust me. Ryan sighed but followed. The path was tight, forcing them to squeeze through the narrow gap. The air felt cooler here, the wind less violent. Then they saw it. A metal door, half buried in the rock wall, covered in dust and rust. It was large, at least 10 feet tall, with faded alien symbols glowing faintly on the surface. Zikara stepped forward, running her hand over the symbols. The markings flickered, then the door let out a low hum. A second later, it slid open. Ryan blinked. That's a good sign, right? Zikara smirked weakly. Come, we are not safe yet. Inside the outpost. The moment they stepped inside, the air changed. It was cool, filtered, and breathable. Ryan's biomask stopped hissing as the system detected clean air. Relief flooded him. Finally, oxygen. He took off the mask and took a deep breath. The air was slightly stale, but it was safe. Zikara collapsed onto a nearby metal crate, her exhaustion finally catching up. Ryan knelt beside her. "All right, let's patch you up." She nodded weakly, her energy drained. Ryan grabbed his portable medkit, scanning the wound with his bioscanner. The screen showed internal bleeding, but nothing fatal. He pulled out a med spray, pressing it against her side. "This might sting," he warned. Zikara barely flinched as the spray sealed the wound, stopping the bleeding. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You're either really tough, or you're too tired to care." Zikara smirked. "Both." He shook his head, bandaging the wound quickly. "That should hold for now." She nodded, her breathing steadier now. A distress signal. Ryan stood and looked around. The outpost was old and dusty, but functional. Metal walls lined with alien consoles, flickering screens, and storage crates filled the room. "Think this place has a comm system?" Ryan asked. Zikara pointed at a large terminal in the center of the room. "Try that." Ryan moved to the terminal, brushing off dust from the controls. He tapped the screen, and, to his surprise, it powered on. A Valkyrie interface appeared, glowing blue. "All right, let's see if I can send a distress signal," he muttered. The system responded, showing a weak signal detected. Ryan activated the transmission, sending an emergency distress call to any ships nearby. "Signal sent," he said. "Now we wait." Zikara's expression darkened. "Waiting may not be an option," she said. Ryan frowned. "Why?" Then, a warning alarm flashed on the terminal. ALERT. NNY SIGNAL DETCTD. Ryan's stomach dropped. Outside, in the distance, a deep metallic roar echoed through the canyon. Zikara clenched her fists. "The scavenger drones found us." Ryan grabbed his blaster, "and I thought we'd get at least a few hours of rest." Zikara stood up slowly, her golden eyes burning with determination. "If they are coming," she said, "then we fight." Ryan smirked. "Guess we don't have a choice." They both turned toward the entrance, ready for the next battle. The fight wasn't over yet. A deep metallic roar echoed through the canyon, sending a chill down Ryan's spine. The scavenger drones had found them. Inside the hidden Valkyrie outpost, Ryan and Zikara stood near the entrance, weapons ready. The dim emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows across the metal walls. Dust floated in the still air, disturbed only by the distant hum of approaching drones. Ryan gritted his teeth. Well, so much for a break. Zikara, still weak from her wounds, straightened her posture. Her golden eyes glowed faintly, her warrior spirit refusing to back down. "They will not stop until we are dead," she said. Ryan adjusted his grip on his blaster. "Then we make sure they don't get that chance." Preparing for the attack, Ryan moved quickly to the terminal he had used earlier to send the distress signal. He tapped on the screen, scanning for any security options. There, he pointed at a defensive turret system. "Looks like this place had automated turrets, but they've been shut down for years." Zikara stepped beside him, studying the controls. "Can you reactivate them?" Ryan's fingers flew over the interface. "Maybe. If the power cells still work." A loud bang outside made them both freeze. Then, metallic footsteps. The drones were here. Ryan cursed under his breath. "I need time." Zikara grabbed her plasma blade, the energy humming as she activated it. "Then I will buy you time." She moved toward the entrance, her breathing still labored, but her determination unwavering. Ryan took a deep breath, then focused on the terminal. He hacked into the system, bypassing the old security locks. "Come on, work." Outside, Zikara stood at the doorway, watching as 3 scavenger drones appeared from the dust storm, their red sensors glowing. The first drone charged, its claws reaching out. Skara dodged, slashing upward with her blade. The plasma edge sliced through metal, severing one of the drone's limbs. The machine screeched, sparks flying, but the other two drones rushed forward, weapons glowing. Skara twisted, ducked, and countered, but she was still weak. Too slow. A drone's claw grazed her shoulder, sending her stumbling backward. Before it could strike again, a plasma turret hummed to life. Ryan's counterattack. Ryan grinned as the old defensive turrets activated. "Got it," he shouted. The first turret fired, a blue energy blast slamming into one of the drones, sending it crashing into the ground. The second turret locked onto another target, blasting off its head unit in a single shot. Skara, now regaining balance, saw her chance. She lunged at the final drone, her blade piercing straight through its core. The machine twitched, sparks flying, before it collapsed motionless. Silence followed. Ryan let out a breath, wiping sweat from his forehead. Well, that was fun. Skara lowered her blade, breathing heavily. "You activated the turrets just in time." Ryan smirked. "Told you I needed a few minutes." She nodded, impressed. "You are more resourceful than I expected, human." Ryan shrugged. "It's called survival. More are coming." Their small victory didn't last long. The terminal flashed with a warning signal. "Large your in force DETCTE." Ryan's stomach dropped. We've got a problem." Skara moved beside him, reading the screen. Dozens of drones were heading their way. The first attack was just a scout unit, she realized. The real attack is coming now. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. "Fantastic. Any more defenses in this place?" Skara's gaze darkened. "None that will hold against that many." Ryan exhaled. They were outnumbered. Then his eyes flicked to the distress signal he had sent earlier. Had anyone received it? "Someone has to be out there," he muttered. "We just have to hold out long enough." Skara nodded. "Then we make our stand." The last stand begins. Ryan grabbed ammo packs, quickly reloading his blaster. He passed an extra energy cell to Skara. "We stick together," he said. "No hero moves." Skara gave a small smile. "You sound like a warrior." Ryan smirked. "Nah, just a guy who doesn't want to die today." Then, a low rumbling outside. The ground shook. Ryan and Skara exchanged a look. The real battle was about to begin. And they had no choice but to fight. Ryan's hands tightened around his blaster, his heart pounding in his chest. The ground trembled, the low hum of approaching scavenger drones growing louder by the second. Beside him, Skara gripped her plasma blade, her golden eyes locked on the entrance. Her breathing was still uneven, but she stood tall, her warrior instincts taking over. "How many are coming?" Ryan muttered, checking his ammo count. Skara glanced at the terminal, where the warning signal flashed again. "Too many." Ryan exhaled. "Great. Love those odds." A sharp mechanical screech echoed from outside. The enemy had arrived. Ryan took position behind a stack of metal crates, using them as cover. Skara stood beside him, ready to strike the moment the fight began. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then, boom. The metal doors exploded, sending debris flying across the room. Ryan ducked, shielding his face from the blast. When he looked up, 4 drones hovered in the doorway, their red sensors locked onto him. The battle had begun. The fight for survival. The first drone fired, sending a pulse of red plasma toward Ryan. He rolled to the side, returning fire. His blue plasma shot struck the drone's armor, but barely dented it. "These things are tougher than I thought," he yelled. Skara leaped forward, her plasma blade slicing through one of the drones in a single motion. Sparks flew as the machine collapsed in a heap of metal. Another drone lunged at her, its claws aiming for her injured side. Ryan acted fast, blasting its central core before it could strike. The drone shuddered, then exploded into pieces. Skara nodded in appreciation, Good shot, human. Ryan smirked. Not bad, huh? But before he could celebrate, more drones poured in. 6, 8, 10. Ryan's stomach dropped. You have got to be kidding me. Skara's expression hardened. We fight until the end. Ryan adjusted his grip. Then let's make it count. Holding the line. The outpost shook as plasma blasts filled the air. Ryan ducked behind cover, firing rapidly, but the drones were relentless. A drone swooped down, its metal claws slashing. Ryan barely dodged in time. He spun, kicking the drone away before blasting it in the head. Zikara, moving like a true warrior, weaved between the enemy, her plasma blade cutting through metal like butter. Despite their efforts, the enemy was overwhelming them. Ryan's blaster beeped, low energy warning. Zikara, I'm almost out of ammo, he called. She gritted her teeth, stabbing another drone. Then we make this count. A desperate gamble. Ryan's mind raced. They needed a way out. Fast. Then he saw it, a power generator in the corner of the outpost, its metal casing covered in dust, but still active. An idea formed. It was risky, but it could work. Zikara, we need to overload the generator, Ryan shouted. She frowned. That will destroy the entire outpost. Exactly. Take them all down at once. Zikara hesitated but then nodded. How do we do it? Ryan sprinted toward the generator, dodging plasma shots. He ripped open the control panel, exposing the circuits. Cover me, he yelled. Zikara stood guard, her blade flashing as she held back the enemy. Ryan's hands worked fast, rewiring the controls, setting the power to overload mode. The screen flashed red. WAR-ing. Critical power surge. Ryan smirked. That'll do it. He turned to Zikara. We have 60 seconds before this place blows. She nodded. Then let's go. The escape Ryan and Zikara raced toward the exit, dodging drone fire. The drones, sensing the overload, screeched in confusion. Some turned to flee, but it was too late. The power generator pulsed, its energy unstable. As Ryan and Zikara burst through the entrance, a massive explosion erupted behind them. The shockwave sent them flying, heat and debris rushing past. Ryan hit the ground hard, rolling across the dirt. For a moment, everything was silent. Then he slowly lifted his head, coughing from the dust. The outpost was gone, reduced to a burning crater. The drones, destroyed. Ryan let out a breath. That was way too close. Zikara, lying nearby, groaned. Remind me never to trust a human's escape plan. Ryan laughed weakly. Hey, we're alive, aren't we? She sighed. Barely. Then, a distant sound. A ship. Ryan's heart jumped. He turned toward the sky, seeing a Valkyrie warship descending from the clouds. The distress signal had worked. Help had arrived. Ryan lay on the ground, breathing heavily, his limbs aching from the explosion's shockwave. The burning wreckage of the outpost crackled behind him, smoke rising into the toxic sky. Beside him, Zikara slowly pushed herself up, her golden eyes narrowed as she scanned the sky. The Valkyrie warship was descending fast, its engines humming as it prepared to land. Ryan grinned weakly. Looks like your people actually got my distress signal. Zikara exhaled in relief. We are lucky they arrived in time. Ryan chuckled, coughing slightly. Yeah, lucky is one word for it. Help arrives. As the warship touched down, its ramp lowered, revealing a group of Valkyrie warriors in sleek silver armor. They moved with precision, their weapons raised as they scanned the area. One of them, a tall Valkyrie officer, stepped forward. His deep blue skin and fierce expression made it clear he was someone important. His eyes locked onto Zikara. Commander Zikara. Zikara straightened, despite her injuries. I am here. The officer let out a sharp breath. We feared you were lost. She nodded. I nearly was. but I had help. The officer's gaze shifted to Ryan, his expression unreadable. A human. Ryan, still sitting on the ground, raised a hand. Yeah, that'd be me. Nice to meet you. The officer didn't smile. Instead, he studied Ryan with mild suspicion, then turned back to Zakara. You fought alongside him. Zakara nodded. He saved my life, more than once. The officer seemed to consider this before finally giving a nod of respect. Then he has earned passage aboard our ship. Ryan sighed in relief. Good, because I wasn't really looking forward to walking off this planet. Leaving Sci-Fi 9. The Valkyrie warriors helped Ryan and Zakara onto the warship. Inside, the air was cool and fresh, and for the first time in days, Ryan felt like he could finally breathe properly. A medic approached Zakara, scanning her wounds. She waved him off. I will be fine. See to the human first. Ryan blinked. Wait me. You gave me your last oxygen. Zakara reminded him. Now you will let them treat you. Ryan hesitated, but eventually let the medic run a bioscan. He was dehydrated, exhausted, and his lungs were strained from exposure to the planet's atmosphere, but he would survive. Zakara sat beside him as the ship lifted off, leaving the deadly wasteland behind. Ryan watched the planet shrink below them, a mix of relief and exhaustion settling over him. Never want to see that place again. Zakara smirked. I agree. A warrior's gratitude. As they traveled through space, Ryan leaned back, letting the exhaustion sink in. But Zakara wasn't done yet. She turned to him, her golden eyes serious. Ryan Carter. He raised an eyebrow. That's the first time you've said my full name. She ignored his joke. You did not have to save me. You did not have to stay. But you did. Ryan shrugged. Yeah, well, I guess I'm just stubborn like that. Zakara's gaze softened. Among my people, life debts are not taken lightly. I owe you mine. Ryan frowned. Wait, what does that mean? Zakara smirked. It means human. If you ever need me, call. Wherever you are in the galaxy, I will come. Ryan blinked, surprised by the weight of her words. That's a big promise, he said. Zakara placed a hand over her heart, the Valkyrie warrior's sign of an oath. It is one I intend to keep. Ryan looked at her, realizing that despite everything, he had made an unexpected ally. Maybe even a friend. He chuckled. Well, I hope I don't get into trouble that bad again. But if I do, I'll keep that in mind. The journey ahead. As the warship moved deeper into space, Ryan felt a sense of peace he hadn't had in days. He had barely survived Sci-Fi 9. He had faced scavenger drones, fought alongside a Valkyrie warrior, and nearly sacrificed his own life. And yet, he had made it. Zakara leaned back, finally allowing herself to relax. You are not like most humans I have met, Ryan Carter. Ryan smirked. And you're not like most aliens I've met, Zakara. She chuckled softly, then closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to rest. Ryan did the same. The warship continued through the stars, carrying them toward a new future, one neither of them could have predicted. But one thing was clear. This was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning.